Hey everybody, welcome back to Broyans Farm. We are finally, or I guess not really we, it's just me. I'm finally in the high tunnels to finish up one of the last steps to get these ready to start growing. As if you've watched my previous videos, you have seen we have started out by tilling and then laying our drip tape down each row. Then we covered it with the fabric. Then we planted our tomatoes. I watered the tomatoes in by hand with our fertilizer mixture water. And now what I'm doing is I got my header line in here, right here by my feet, and I'm going through, because at the end of each row our drip tape comes up out of here and just lays on top of the ground. So I'm going to cut a slit. I'm going to hook my header line with my valves on it up to my drip tape, and then that'll be connected to the hydrant over there, which is hard to see behind the door. And then we will be ready to start watering underneath the ground, and there'll be no more overhead watering. So this is going to take me a little while, but I'll show you the process so you know exactly how we do it. And maybe if you wanted to, you could do the same thing in your garden. So the nice thing about our greenhouse and our header line is that we've been doing this now for at least 3 or 4 years, and we already have our header line cut to the length we need it. We have our piece of hose that's already hooked up to the hydrant, and we already have our valves in place where they need to be. So I can just cut a hole right here in the fabric and hook it up without really having to do any measuring or any major cutting of any sort. So I'll get right to it and I'll show you how this works. We like to leave a lot of extra drip tape so that we don't run out when we're trying to hook it up to our header line here. And also, we don't want to have the drip tape come up out and come right into it. I like to have a little bit sticking out because we like to be able to see the water flowing through, like when it puffs up, so we can know for sure that water is flowing through it. So like I said before, we already have our screws on the edge of the high tunnel here, and so I know exactly where my water line is, which is basically right on top of this yellow line right here. So that makes it really simple. I know now that I can go about right here with my scissors. And I just want to be careful because my drip tape is on top of the ground right now, and I do not want to cut that, because then that'll just make bigger problem. Oof. Ow. So now that I'm through, I can cut my line, cut my hole, not cut my line. And so basically, it's not going to be right here right now. I gotta feel around for it. It's somewhere right around here. There it is. Okay. I think I'm sitting on it. I'll pull this up out. And like I said, we got a lot of extra here, almost too much. There it is. My white side up. So there. Now I'll pull this down to where it needs to be exactly. And I should be good to go. Now I'll cut this off. Like I said, I don't like to have it come right up out and come right into my valve. I like to leave a little bit sticking out. So I'll probably set it about right here. So now that I got my line cut and I've got the opening, like a nice circle there that you can see, it'll slip right onto my valve here. And then this is like a collar right here. I can turn it, and what that does is that tightens down on the drip tape, and it doesn't allow any water then to come around and leak. Or it's not supposed to anyway. There's usually some kind of leak somewhere, but I'll tighten that about as good as I can. And that's exactly what I'm looking for right there. So now I'll go through my other 5 rows, I'll get that done, and then I'll head down to the other end and I'll show you what I do down there. This is what I mean by knowing exactly where my water and my rows are exactly, because we have these screws here at each end. The upper one's the water, the lower one's the row. So I know right here is my drip line, right here, and right there's my valve already in place. So it'll be ready to hook up with ease. So now the top is done. Takes a little while, but to do it right, it takes some time. So now that I got this done, I can head down to the other end, and I gotta get that end tied up. So what that's gonna be is I gotta do the same thing I kinda did down here, find out where the drip tape's coming up out of the ground, cut a hole in the plastic, feed it up out, and then what I'll actually do is we have these little pieces of plastic, and so I'll take the drip tape that's sticking out, I'll fold it like 5 or 6 times, and then I'll slip these little like collars or sleeves over top of it, whatever you want to call them, and that'll kind of seal everything off, so that way the water will come down and it will stop, and then it can build up pressure throughout the entire line. And throughout the years they've worked pretty well. Sometimes they still drip a little, but you know, it's okay to get wet because it's just going to go down into the soil. Again, here is my 2 screws. The upper one is my water, the lower one's my row. As you can see, I follow that back, right there is my row. So that means my drip line should be about right, probably right around in here. So I'll cut my slit right here, feed it up out, and then I'll put that sleeve on it like I said. And the thing is the only reason we don't keep underneath the plastic, like I could close this off before it even comes up out of the ground and then you'd never see it. But the problem with that is then you would never know, unless you could hear it hissing underneath the ground, if a mole or a mouse would chew a hole in it, and then you know you're not going to build pressure all the way down at the end here. You only have pressure at that end, so you'd never know. That way, every time we turn on the water, we like to come down here and we'll check and make sure all these are blown up and that there's pressure down here. So there I got my slit. Now I just kind of got to feel around a little bit until I find my drip line. There it is. Kind of buried in a little bit. And now I can feed it up out of there. We had a lot of extra down here. And boom, now what I'll do is, so you've got this extra here. I've got way too much extra here, so I'm gonna cut some of that off. And so I'll cut it off about right there, looks good. So right here, if you can see, that is my collar. And actually I think what it is, it's just a piece of kind of like the header line up there, and they cut it off. Very simple and cheap. So I'll take this, and I like to have my folds about 2 inches. I'll fold it. What's the 3rd time, 4th time, 5th time. So there you got a pretty thick piece, and that'll, if you get any more than 5, it gets very difficult to get this on here. So right there, that's about just what I want to see. Right in the middle, and boom. Now this row is completely done. It's set up at the other end, it's set up down here. We could turn that sucker on and it could water for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours, whatever you want to water for, and theoretically should be perfect. All right, so there we go. This high tunnel is now completely finished, besides staking the tomatoes. Like I said many of times, if you want to see exactly how to do it from the beginning, you can go back to my previous videos, and I don't exactly have them titled, you know, 1, 2, and 3, but you can watch them, and at least some part in the video I'll be showing every part of what I've done in the past couple weeks here to get up to this point now, to where we can water these tomatoes and they can begin growing. And so, like I said, now all we have to do is stake them, which that's going to take some time, and then we'll have to string them. And stringing will kind of take several weeks up to a couple months, because as the tomatoes grow, we'll keep stringing them. So it takes a while, but that's kind of a more slow process, and I'll definitely show you how I do that as we move along. Okay, so now I'm down the lower high tunnel, and just like the upper one, I just got this all hooked up, ready to go. Usually, since we've started doing tomatoes in this high tunnel, we've always watered them from the bottom and pushed the water uphill, but I thought that was kind of a lot of a lot to ask to push that little line water all the way up and get good pressure at the other end, which when I say the other end, I mean this end. So now I put the header line down here so I can water downhill, and hopefully the water will definitely flow easier, and I can water the other end just as good as I can water this end, because what I was afraid of other years was that the tomatoes down on the lower end were getting a lot more water than the ones up here, and it just looked to me like they weren't doing quite as good. So now that this one's ready to go, I'm going to turn it on here, and hopefully everything goes well. Water's flowing through, and especially since it's the first time, I'm going to go slow. I want the water to build up pressure as slow as possible, because these lines have never seen water before and I don't want anything to blow out. So you can already see here it's building up some pressure. The water's coming out of that dripper, and that's what I was talking about. That's that slit right there that the water will come out of. And then here's my pressure gauge. That tells me how much pressure I have in my lines. Well, mostly, it tells me definitely in this header line because that's where it's at, but then it's supposed to be a pretty accurate reading for the whole drip tape going down through, because if you start getting more than 15-20 psi, then you're running the risk of just blowing these little drip lines right apart. So we don't want to do that either. So now that we're up to pressure, I'll come down here, see how these guys are doing. That's exactly what I'm looking for right there. A nice circular drip tape that I know is got pressure. And right here is what I was explaining. Sometimes even with the that collar on there and me wrapping it 6 times, water does get through there, and as you can see, it's dripping out. So I might have to maybe either put another one on, wrap it a little tighter, or even put a zip tie on.